consciousness really is the consciousness of the universe.
Good morning, good
Oh,
evening, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. My name is Trevor Garifuna. This is the third episode of African-Centered Consciousness. And today we have our special guest, the son of the one and only, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, right? Julius Garvey is here today to talk with us. We also have Dr. Kevin Washington, who will be here in a couple of minutes, who's a psychologist, who's going to engage with us. First and foremost, we want to thank our audience for being here, for taking the time out at this hour to be a part of this. Okay, thank you. We also want to thank the United States of Africa for its consistency and making sure that we open the eyes of our people to the realities of what's going on. Realities. Today, we're going to talk about psychology. Today, we're going to talk about health. We're going to talk about things that mean something to us as a nation of people. Once again, welcome. My name is Trevor Garifuna and President Daniel Mbambuno. Thank you very much for this platform, and we're live on Tuna Cheki TV. Dr. Julius, please introduce yourself as we go into this very beautiful discussion.
well, I'm Julius Garvey, a retired physician, cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon. And I'm the second son of Marcus Garvey. I have an older brother who died last year in December, and he was Marcus Jr. So there are two of us as his children. So that's basically my story to date. And I'm very, very happy to be here with you, Trevor, and also to be on the program itself with Daniel. I think Daniel is doing an excellent job, and I congratulate him and all of those who work with him. And I'm very, very happy to be a part of this.
Thank you, Doctor. It's definitely not easy, the task that this young brother Daniel is doing. I admire him. I don't know. I'm a very busy brother, but Daniel is the only other brother that I know who is as busy as I am. and it's as consistent as I am. And him and I, we fight all the time. Okay, we fight all the time. And I love it, because we're men who can fight with each other and continue to work, Doctor. We can continue to work regardless of whatever, if that makes any sense.
Well, it does. And that's what my father preached, was unity. We can have some differences, but basically we have more in common than we have that separates us. So we should be able to work together.
Exactly, especially men and women who understand that in order for us to move agendas forward, it's okay to disagree sometimes, but we keep moving the agenda. We have Dr. Washington, who we're about to introduce now. Dr. Washington, are you ready to introduce yourself? Good morning, sir.
Good morning, brother. Can you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear, sir.
All right. It's a pleasure to be here, to be with you on this platform. And of course, Brother Daniel, as you mentioned, is one of the hardest working men in the African world at this time, creating a space for us to be able to understand how to be and to become more African. Brother Garvey, you and I have been together on a platform or two in Washington, D.C. with our dear brother at the WHUT TV there. So we've been together before. So we are indeed honored to be here. I apologize at some level because I'm in a different space and my lighting is not quite the way I want it to be, but it does not change the enlightenment that I indeed desire to experience from this profound and prolific conversation. But I'm an African-centered psychologist looking at the idea of African reality and understanding that the first thing that people take from a population is their capacity to see themselves as being human. And so we know about the brainwashing process. And so that is the brainwashing reality. When you rename somebody something, then you have changed their understanding of who they are. When you begin to tell them where they will live and how they will provide for themselves, you are taking their consciousness. And so we recognize that the human trafficking experience known as the Ma'afa, and some call the the slave trade, but there was no trade. There was no swap. See, when we use the oppressor's language to describe our reality, we erasing our own truth from this process. And so there was no trade. There was no swap between two people where there was an equal benefit between two parties, right? And so we look at this idea of how do we converse about who we are as a people, centering this conversation into our own African reality, even if it is Yoruba, if it is Ifa, I mean, if it is Swahili or Wolof, right, or Akan, we're still centering Bambara, this idea in what does it mean to be who we are and not who the oppressor says that we are.
Agreed upon. Thank you for that breakdown, Dr. Washington. We're going to ask some very crucial questions today about psychology. You've already touched up a little bit about how the oppressor is swift and slithers like a snake when it comes to changing your identity in a subtle way. Slick, like a snake, and subtle about it. All of a sudden, you don't know who you are. So I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you. I want to start with Dr. Julius Garvey. Sir, you have introduced yourself. We have a couple of questions that we want to ask you. I want to start by asking you, do you recall living with your father, Marcus Garvey? I know that you were young when he transitioned, but do you recall living with your father, Marcus Garvey? And if you do, what do you recall?
Well, I do, but, quite frankly, this is not about me. And, so I don't really want to go into quotes my story. Mm-hmm. I want us to really get into the story and the main story, the main event, mm-hmm. which is African consciousness. Mm-hmm. And you had asked me before in terms of a definition. And I think we should go into that. We're going to go into it.
We're going to go into it. We're definitely going to go into it. We're not here to make this about Marcus Garvey. We're not here to make this about...
It's okay about Marcus Garvey, not about Julius Garvey.
No, I'm with you. We're not going to make it about Marcus or about Julius, right? But a lot of people don't know you, right? Yeah, don't know of you, but we know of your father. So I want to ask a question that an everyday individual might ask. You, once we get a chance to meet you, do you recall living with your father, Marcus Garvey? And if you could just share with us what you slightly remember about that experience, and we'd go straight into it, because that's the only question that I'm asking that has nothing to do with African-centeredness.
Okay, basically, my memories are of us being in England. We went there when I was about 3 years old, and my father moved from Jamaica with the family to England. He went first, and he brought us over there afterwards, but basically in 1935. Mm-hmm. And I was very much a youngster, and I remember him, in terms of usual things around the house. So, myself and my brother playing, my father being there, watching us, and being solicitous of us, falling, etc., playing with us in the backyard, throwing snowballs, taking us out to the theater, the movie theater, buying ice cream, those sorts of memories.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And again, this is not about that. Thank you, Dr. Julius. So the question today is going to start off with African-centered consciousness. Dr. Julius, Dr. Washington, same question is going to go to the both of you. What does African-centered consciousness mean to you? And how should we as a nation utilize this consciousness? Dr. Julius.
Well, it's really, really, a huge topic. Dr. Washington knows this. And it's difficult to paraphrase it per se, to do it justice, because basically from the African perspective, consciousness is primary. The entire universe is nothing but conscious energy, which expresses itself in different forms. Mm-hmm. So consciousness is without limit and is therefore complete and all pervasive. That it is omnipresent. Consciousness as a word describes its ability to be aware. And this is the sense in which we use it in everyday consciousness. But awareness is only one aspect of consciousness. Our ancestors call this Amun. And we're going back now to Kemet. And I think it's important to go back to the source of our understanding, the source of our wisdom, the source of our culture. Because as Dr. Washington said, it's expressed differently by the Bambara, by the Ashanti, by the Yoruba. But it's the same African-centered consciousness. So we need to go back to that. Our ancestors called that awareness Amun. Another aspect of consciousness is power or energy. This is the power of self-revelation and self-manifestation. And this is omnipotence, the supreme power. Our ancestors call this power Ra. These are like two sides of the same coin, inseparable. The third aspect of consciousness is knowledge or wisdom, the knowledge of the totality of being. So that is existence itself, absolute reality. So you have two sides of the coin, but you have the knowledge of the two sides of the coin. So it's the knowledge of all things that are intrinsic to existence. Our ancestors call this aspect of consciousness Patah, P-T-A-H. And so thus we have the three fundamental aspects of existence: awareness, which is Amun, power or energy, which is Ra, and knowledge, which is Patah. The three that are one. And this is the first Trinity. And of course, as we have been saying, we use one word for this. We call this consciousness. But this source is present in all things, big or small, animate or inanimate, to a greater or lesser extent in the multitudinous different natures of created things, according to the will of the Creator. Now, our ancestors call the divine will Atum. So we have the universe, we have pure consciousness at rest in itself, complete in boundless space, as the totipotential absolute reality from which the universe will be born. For there to be any activity, it has to be preceded by will. For creation to occur, universal energy, which is Ra, has to be activated by will, which is Atum. And so we have Atum Ra as the doer, is unchanging and a totipotential essence. So manifestation must proceed from this. I think I could stop there in terms of a definition, and because it's a two-part question, but I think we need to deal with the definition initially and then how it manifests itself in perhaps human consciousness, if that's the direction in which you want to go.
Thank you, Dr. Julius. A thorough breakdown of that. I don't know what that leaves you with Dr. Kevin Washington. Please, African-centered consciousness. And when I say, what does that mean to you? Not just per definition of the word. What does it mean to Dr. Kevin Washington?
Sir, Brother Garifuna, Dr. Garvey was very clear in articulating the conceptualization of the African cosmogony, the African cosmology coming out of the construct of ancient Kemet, to talk about the dimensions of self-knowledge and awareness, the idea of power, the idea of being aware, understanding the idea of Amun, Ra, Patah, understanding the idea of Septepi, the first thing, the knowing, the utterance, Husia, understanding the idea of voice. All of these things are elements of what it means to be conscious. When we talk about the idea of conscious, we have to begin, as our brother Dr. Garvey stated, this idea of being aware. Aware is having some particular perception of something that is in your purview. It could be a sensation of being aware of the light or the coolness on your body, but also there's something about an awareness of your internal essence and or being. The idea that when you say that I'm going to be by myself, the question is, who are you beside? There is an awareness that there's something within you that's greater than yourself. The idea of not only being aware of sensations, but the internal reality, but understanding that you are connected via generation. So we talk about among the Zulu, talk about Ubuntu, this idea that our humanity is tied to one another, that my awareness says that I'm not just simply here, but I'm also connected to something else. Among the Congo, they talk about being a trifold being. That is that not only are we here present, but we also past and we future at the same time.
Right.
So when you talk about the idea of awareness, a mother that gives birth to a female child gives birth to her grandchild at the same time. The awareness is that the woman gives birth to her grandchild because the eggs that were inside of the baby that was carried in the grandmother was the eggs that become the grandchild later. So the idea of awareness is that I am connected on multiple levels. The idea that I'm connected, not only am I connected on the physical plane, but I'm also connected in the spiritual plane. Talk about among the bomber, they're calling God clay, but the idea of Daya, the part of the self that is here in the physical realm and also the spiritual realm at the same time. So this idea of awareness in an African perspective suggests that I have multiple layers of existence at one time, that I'm not only here, but I'm also back there, and I'm also in the future. If you talk about even the terminology, the word woke, right? Stay woke. To be woke is past participle within the English context, meaning that past participle is stay woke means about a past phenomenon. But when I tell you in the present, I'm giving you a directive for the future. So how can I give the past participle about past to inform you about the present and to give you projection to the future if I'm not understanding that I'm not only here presently, but I'm also past and I'm also future. So the African construct tells us that we're not just simply here in this space, in this moment right now, that we're transcendent beings, that we move beyond this space. And so we are also we also those that have gone before us. That's why we pour libation, because we acknowledge the fact that our existence is predicated on somebody who came before us, but also we are paving the way. The idea among the Congo, we pre-pave a way for those that are coming after us. So this idea of African consciousness says that I am not only here, but I'm past and future, but also it says that I'm sacred and divine. Among the ancients of Kemet, as Brother Julius was saying, Dr. Garvey was saying about the committed thought, and I'll close on this one. They would say that everyone would have to repeat every morning Anuk Asar, which says, I am divine. Anuk Asar says, I am divine, which means that there is something inside of me, this spark that is divine. If you understand that when the sperm cell met the egg inside of the womb, in the place of darkness, scientists tells us that there is a spark of light that comes out. Where does that light come from? That light comes then from the divine. So when they said in Kemet, Anuk or Sa, they were saying that I have the light of Ra, I have the light of God within me, and therefore I can move forward. Our ancestors in the United States would they love the passages from the Bible that says, greater is he that is in me. This idea of understanding that we're here, but we're also greater than this particular moment. And so among the Zulu, the word Zulu actually means people of the heavens. So there's the same idea of being divine. And so we recognize that we are gods on earth. So this is the idea of African consciousness, as Dr. Garvey was pulling us into this idea of understanding that we are aware, we have power, and we have knowledge because we are sacred and divine. We are past, present, and future. And more importantly, we have a transcendent consciousness to do good, to be good, because we have to be responsible for those that are coming after us.
Agree part. I want to quote Dr. Amos Wilson. Once upon a time, he had a talk on the legacy of Marcus Garvey. And Dr. Amos says that the foundation of wisdom rely on the knowledge of the self. And Dr. Julius spoke of awareness. Dr. Washington, you spoke of awareness, right? And then Dr. Wilson says the lack of knowledge and amnesia are pathological. Dr. Julius. So before we go into how do we utilize this African-centered consciousness, we speak a little bit about that, this lack of knowledge of ourselves that has put us in this rut that we're in. Dr. Julius.
Yes, I think that's very well said. And the quotation from Amos Wilson, he's just a fabulous, was just a fabulous psychologist. I mean, he hit everything, you know, the nail on the head, so to speak, over and over and over again. And for anybody listening, you know, read his stuff, you know, African-centered conscious, black on black violence, etc., etc.
Right.
So basically, you know, as Kevin was saying, we get to the point where there's an evolutionary process as the divine creates out of himself the many things, and one of the many things is us, and you know, out of the forces that are intrinsic to divinity, and I'm not going to go into them because I don't want to confuse anybody by more Kemetic names than I have to use, so to speak. But what we end up with, and again, as Brother Kevin said, is Ausar. And Ausar is, shall we say, the image of the Creator in us as a human being. In other words, Homo sapiens sapiens. And that's why we have to go back to Kemet. We have to go back to the continent, because that's where Homo sapiens sapiens came into existence 200,000 years ago. And that's why we can talk about African-centered consciousness, because that is where human consciousness, which is a manifestation of divine consciousness or cosmic consciousness, first took place 200,000 years. So we are the beginning. We are the first expression. Okay, so we're the download. Now, there's a beautiful story, and it's the oldest story ever told, 6,000 years. And it's the story of Ausar, Auset, and Nephthys, Seth, and then ultimately Heru. And, you know, I guess if you won't have time to sort, I'll try to skim through it, yeah, because of the time constraint. But in terms of the creative process, you know, how we were created as I just mentioned, Ausar, Auset, Seth, and Nephthys. These are aspects of consciousness in terms of their human manifestation as mind, and basically Ausar would be the divine mind in terms of its manifestation, and his sister wife Auset is the individual mind. So to speak, that looks at things as well as knows consciousness, because you have to understand that consciousness knows itself and knows all things that it's aware of. That's what awareness means per se. And then you have Seth. Now, and Seth basically is ego. Okay, and Seth is disruptive unless he's controlled, because Seth has a lot of power, and it's the download of the power aspect. You remember we talked about awareness. Well, the download of the awareness aspect is Ausar and Auset. The download of the power aspect is Seth, you see, and then the download of the will aspect is Heru, the activity. That's how you function in terms of space and time. So what has happened in terms of the download, and the story goes that, you know, Ausar ruled his kingdom, and the kingdom included, of course, you know, his wife and Seth, as well as Nephthys. And Nephthys is knowledge that, and in terms of things that you know out there. So this was very peaceful, and basically Ausar created the first civilization, and that's our story. Okay, and then Ausar, now after he had created this first civilization there in Kemet, and this is our eponymous ancestor, then he went around the world civilizing other people. And how did he do this? He didn't carry war to them. He didn't beat them up. Okay, he went and he spoke to them, and he taught them agriculture. He taught them the arts and the sciences. Okay, and the music, etc. And he civilized the world. Now, when he was away, Brother Seth, okay, who is this powerful guy, etc., etc., wanted to take over. And he had left his wife Auset in charge. And of course, this is, again, consciousness of things, whereas he is the universal consciousness. Okay, so Seth took over now and created confusion. He came back. When he came back now, Seth killed him, put him in a coffin, okay, and floated him down the Nile. Now, when you say put him in a coffin, that means you've disconnected yourself from universal consciousness, because Ausar is universal consciousness. So what Seth does as ego is that he disconnects himself from universal consciousness. And now he's only conscious of things out there. And he exercises his will as power, okay, to deal with things out there. Now, this is the individuality, and this is what we see here. You know, everybody here in the United States, which is where I am, and around the world, it's all individualism. It's all power over other things. Everybody's exercising their willpower to get things and to do things. And this is Sethian, and that's where Satan comes from. Okay, so, you know, I'm trying to make a long story short, but, you know, Outset now goes, which is consciousness, yeah, right? The superficial individual consciousness goes now and remembers Ausar, because Seth then cuts him up. Once she finds the body, Seth comes back, cuts it up, and so on. But Outset and Nephthys, who is the sister, but is the wife of Seth, but she also participates in that whole business of mourning for Ausar, etc., and helps to put the pieces back together. Now, putting the pieces back together is remembering.
Okay.
So both these ladies, who are aspects of consciousness, awareness, are remembering what it was like to be this divine person, so to speak, the download of divine consciousness.
Okay.
Now, in doing that, now they have a relationship with Ausar, which is an interesting story. Of course, you know, Outset was his wife, but when they remember them, they found them all pieces except the penis. Okay, it was cut up into 14 pieces, but they found all the pieces except the penis. So what it's saying is that they now have a asexual relationship.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not about the physicality. It's telling you that it's metaphysical. Okay, that's a metaphysical story. And that's how these things were taken from generation to generation. They are metaphysical stories. Okay, so Outset has a relationship with Ausar and becomes pregnant and gives birth to Heru. Now, who is Heru? Now, Heru is will. Okay, and now Outset is consciousness. Now, this consciousness, or awareness, if you will, of things together with will fights Seth. Okay, and what this means now is a process of meditation. That's what we call it at this point in time. But this was taught in the temples in Egypt. The process by which you defeat ego, which is Seth, and they battle over a long period of time. Okay. Eventually, of course, Heru or Horus defeats Seth and wants to kill him, but you can't kill him because he's yourself, right? So you resurrect Ausar, and you use Seth now, which is the power of Seth, to help to resurrect Ausar and allow Ausar then to live. But in resurrecting Ausar, then Heru now sits on the throne. So this is a process where there was the download of divine consciousness, universal consciousness, got trapped into individual consciousness, okay, and ruined everything, created chaos. Okay, but then there's a process of an ability to reverse it through a meditation process, okay, which comes from remembering an awareness of who you were, and also from teachers who would teach you, you know, who you were, etc. And over time, then you are able to defeat ego and resurrect your divine self. And then this divine self now is able to be active and sit on the throne, which is the throne of your own life, and direct your own life. So this is that story in as hurried a fashion as I can do because of the time constraints. So we have divinity. We are made in the image of God. Yeah. We've forgotten. Plus the fact that our culture then encourages us to forget. Right. Because the culture in which we live, which largely at this point in time is a Western culture, which does not believe consciousness is primary, believe consciousness is secondary. Right. You see, so the only consciousness that is allowed is a consciousness of physical things. You're conscious of your body, you're conscious of your ego, you're conscious of things. but that's a superficial consciousness. It's not the divine consciousness through
Okay.
which you would understand the unity of everything, because consciousness is oneness. There's no border to consciousness. You see what I mean? So when you can express that consciousness, then that is where you get to ma'at, which is the unity of everything, the harmony of everything, and the interconnectedness of everything, and justice, etc., etc. And that, kind of briefly is our Kemetic story, which brings us, to what we have to recover from our past and from our history and from our understanding, as was mentioned, of our cosmogony, our cosmology, and our metaphysics and our philosophy.
Right. All right. Thank you, Dr. Julius and Dr. Washington. I want you to piggyback. Dr. Julius always give us a lot, right? And thank you for that. Dr. Kevin Washington also said that the black man's lack of knowledge of himself was deliberately induced. Okay, so remembering that Dr. Julius is talking about is the phase where we're at. We're in the remembering process, which is going to lead to ma'at, unity, ultimate unity. As a psychologist, Dr. Washington, what does that mean, this remembering process, this coming out of this ignorance that was deliberately induced?
And that's a very powerful question. Thank you, Dr. Garvey, for again sharing the depths of knowledge of the committed worldview of understanding Asar, Set, and Heru, and others. And so I would also join in with Dr. Garvey by saying that if you have not, be sure to pick up Blueprint to Black Power by Dr. Amos Wilson, and again, African Consciousness and Black on Black Violence. These are very powerful books. Dr. Wilson was a jegna, for want of a better word, than mentor of mine. I actually met him when I was finishing my doctoral work in Washington, D.C., and he was in New York at the time. And I remember when I was preparing to really just stop this whole PhD process because it was foolishness, and received a phone call from him on that day. And there was no way that he could have physically known what I was going through, what I just gone through on the internship.
Yeah.
But in spirit, he gave me marching orders, and he said, remember to do this. And he gave me things to do. And I was wanting to complete my graduate work and go and work with him. At the time, he was about 3/4 through with the Blueprint to Black Power. But I wanted to just go and be in his presence, right? But the idea then of consciousness and awareness speaks volumes here, even in that story. As I thought about it, I had not thought about it like this until right now, that what gave him the insight to reach out and to call. Probably was the first and probably only call that I received from him outside of me trying to initiate something else with him. So what was that about? And that was, again, the idea of awareness and consciousness, that we are not simply here, that we are beyond here. And so he planted something within me to consider. And I asked the question, did he have any awareness that within a few months he would be dead, right? How did it physically not hear? Like, how would he know to do that? And so these are truisms that we can speak of. And so Dr. Amos Wilson is, again, a person that I admire because of his scholarship, his intellect, his insight. And I'd like what he says also about all history is psychohistory. And so what you speak about, Brother Garifuna, is this idea of how can you transform someone's awareness of who they are through a historical depiction of what you want them to become, right? So when you begin to recognize that the retelling of a narrative of a people becomes inscribed in their minds, and that becomes a part of their identity. Dr. Wade Noble says that power is the ability to define reality and to have others to respond to your definition as if it were their own. This idea of giving content over and over and over again, that you can make one dead to oneself and become more honorable towards someone else outside of them. So we are a people who are willing to give more credence and deference to our oppressors. We try to act like and to imitate and to become like and to be liked by those who do not like us, who have a disdain for us and have done nothing but given us evil. That is a transformative process of making one dead to oneself. At any time we even have a conversation about African reality, African consciousness, we are attacked by those that look like us. Dr. Nobles tells a powerful story about this when he says that you take a sheepdog by taking it away from its biological mother dog when it is born, and it suckles at the breast of the sheep, and it believes itself to be a sheep and not a dog. And you can take that confused dog and you can put another dog in the pen with it, and it will attack and kill that other dog because it believes this other dog is the enemy. You can if you put its own biological mother in the pen with it, it will attack and try to kill her. And the worst thing about it, Brother Garfuna, is that if you put in front of it a mirror, it will attack its own image in the mirror because it believes its own image is its problem. The point is that when you have a population that has been made to suckle from the nurturance of a deprived population that says that we are superior, that we are the best, that we are the only, then we begin to see ourselves as inferior. When we begin to see constructs of a Europeanized image of a Jesus, and we see a construct of everything great, wonderful, and powerful being European, it begins to make one become dead to oneself. And so I want to start where Brother Julius, Dr. Garvey, left off in this conversation when he ended with Ma'at. And I want to pick up there because the story of Osar, Set, and Heru is very powerful in understanding the idea of chopping of pieces in 13 parts and the regenerative process of bringing forth new life. And this idea of Ma'at, and understanding that Ma'at is this idea of order, this idea of justice, reciprocity, propriety, harmony, balance, and she was married metaphorically according to the understanding of Kemet to Tahuti. Tahuti is thought, and later the Greeks called the Tahuti Thoth, and so forth and so on. So the idea is that in ancient Kemet, they understood that you had to have correct action, which was Ma'at, married to correct thought in order to be able to elevate consciousness. It's the idea that you cannot think one way and actually function in a different way because you're going to be out of order. And so they were very clear about Ma'at, the idea of the correct action being married to correct thought in order to have an elevation of consciousness. So I want to submit here that when we talk about African consciousness, we must recognize, again, the cosmology, the epistemology, the axiology of African people, and say that why are they telling us this idea of putting thought and action together? We know that the Europeans took Ma'at and they made Ma'at blind justice. We know about all of that. We understand that they took Tahuti and made it thought. We get that. But what were they telling us in the first occasion? They were saying that in order to be able to move through anything, that's why they even had the ibis bird. As a matter of fact, Tahuti is represented as the ibis bird, right? Reading like a scribe. And so the idea that the ibis bird is able to move through the murky waters of the Nile, the muddy waters, and find that which is edible and that which can be consumed. That even in this murkiness, and that's the idea of thought, that things can be murky, they can be muddy, they can be confused, they can be clouded, but there is some part of who you are that's able to discern the stuff that is no good to find that which is good in order to be able to move forward. But you have to then, once you know better, you have to be able to do better. And so I think many of us have a knowledge base. So they said you got to know, right, the idea of Thoth, Tahuti, but you also got to act like you know. And so we've passed down this knowledge and understanding. We had no idea that it was African cosmology, but the point is that we've talked about this as a people in African reality in America. You got to have, if you know better, you do better. You got to have correct action, married to correct thought, and so forth and so on. So this is the works of Dr. Amos Wilson and others. That is how to wake the dead, right? Who are dead to themselves. That's what the Honorable Louis Farrakhan talks about as well, about waking the dead. You hear this over and over again about waking the dead to themselves. That's the story about Lazarus in the Bible, right? Can these dry bones live? The same conversation. If I kill somebody to who they are, how do I then imbue them with some knowledge? And that is, I give them back who they are in their own divinity. That's African reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. And we need to assimilate, as Dr. Amos Wilson says, and this assimilating process is a part of the strategy. It's a part of the strategy, has been part of the strategy since day one. Since day one. Dr. Julius Irving, it's on your tip of your tongue. Say whatever it is that you want to say, baby.
Well, just a couple of things, coming from Kevin, to, continue to elaborate a little bit. Tehuti or thought has been considered to be thought, but the essence of thought is really wisdom. So you need wisdom to function in the way in which Dr. Washington was talking about, to look in the muddy waters and pick out that which is correct. So Tehuti is really wisdom, because as you know, most of us, think all kinds of things, but they're garbage, as we call it in terms of a meditation experience. It's the monkey mind. There are all kinds of thoughts that go through your head. But we're really talking about wisdom when we talk about Tehuti or thought. And then the whole transformational process was really, again, it was symbolized by Nephthys, who was supposedly the wife or companion of Seth. Now she also had a relationship with Alsar. Now her relationship gave you Anubis, who Anubis is symbolic of transformation. So Nephthys is a transformational process that takes place as we get to understand more and remember more of who we were and who we truly are in terms of ourselves as Osar. And then I just want to piggyback also on the story of Lazarus, because, break down the word Lazarus. I mean, and Dr. Washington is smiling because he knows that Dr. Finch has broken this down for us too. And he's another, great, African, psychologist, historian, et cetera, et cetera. But the raising of the dead, Azarus, that is Avsar. You see, and that's how it came down in terms of the Old Testament, or at least the Hebrew people recording that. And you can see that the story that we've talked about, basically Heru is a virgin birth, right? Because it's asexual. And that's where that story comes from in terms of, Christ and Jesus and so on. And the anointment, of Osar in terms of the remembering and the first mummification, covering up and put together his pieces. That is all in terms of Genesis, etc. There was darkness and there was light. I didn't get into all of that, but there was formlessness and there was form. There was darkness and then there was light, and there was shall we say, universal consciousness, but then there became consciousness of things. All of that came out of, again, you go back to say Hermopolis, and I don't want to get too much into the Kemetic, cosmogony, but it's all there, and it has been used by other people who came in contact with Egypt and used it, but did not necessarily understand it fully. But I think, fortunately for us, at this time, there have been many scholars, such as Dr. Finch, as mentioned, and people like Amos Wilson that we're talking about,
right,
who have recovered this, so we can correct the miseducation of the Negro, if you will,
yes,
which we know and was brought to us, way back in the 30s, etc. I can't think of his name. Who wrote that book, The Miseducation of the Negro?
Dr. Carter G. Woodson.
Carter G. Woodson.
Yeah.
So this is a fact, you see. And if you educate somebody with the same education,
yeah,
as the people who has oppressed that particular person, therefore you're going to impart to that particular person the same values, the same morality, the same ideology, the same religion, the same psychology, the same history as the person who oppressed you.
Yes.
And then if you absorb that and become a part of that, then those people have hated you, and that's why they dehumanize you.
Mhm.
So when you absorb all of this, now you become like them, and you get to be what Franz Fanon calls the wretched of the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Black skin, white mask. You're the Oreo cookie. You're supposed to be black, but you're really white in that sense, or at least Eurocentric as opposed to the Afrocentric. I prefer to deal with it in that as opposed to color. You see, so then you hate yourself.
Yeah.
Dr. Washington was talking about this, and you hate anyone that looks like you. And that's and Amos Wilson. That's why you get black on black violence. And that's why we destroy ourselves. And that's why we have the oppressor. And, so it's a terrible mind game that has been played on us. And again, to Marcus Garvey, we've got to liberate our minds from mental slavery, because they help us to liberate the body. None but ourselves can free our minds.
Yeah, none but ourselves can free our minds. A lot of people don't understand that. Our brother Bob Marley got that from our brother Marcus Mosiah Garvey.
True.
And his legacy continues to live on. Once again, everyone, we are live on Pan-African Leadership Center. My name is Trevor Garifuna. We're live on Tunateki TV, and this is the United States of Africa. We're having a very important dialogue today with the one and only Dr. Julius Garvey and Dr. Kevin Washington. And we want to thank some of our guests for being with us today. We have Carmela Walker, MPA. Thank you for sharing that. Again, it's Carter G. Woodson. We recommend everyone read that book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Sister Lauryn Hill even wrote an album called The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And it's talking about the reality of our people. Paul Irving, thank you for tuning in. None of these brothers right here, Brother Paul, Julius, or Kevin, not once have they said, I'm a leader. Not once have they said, I am a preacher. They're both doctors. They're here actually sharing information with us, just broadening our perspective on who we are. And at this moment, we want to go back to what Dr. Amos said. The black man's lack of knowledge of himself was deliberately induced. It was deliberately induced. So we're going to go into the last part of this conversation, which is the vanity of hope. Dr. Kevin, I want to start with you. The vanity of hope. Dr. Julius just touched up on the fact that the oppressor is the same one looking to free us from the yoke of his and her oppression. Now we have leadership, Brother Paul. We have leadership who are, and I won't name any of them, but they are integrationists. What they wanted us was to be a part of this system that never wanted us to be a part of it anyway. We should have honored Plessy versus Ferguson. When they said separate but equal, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with separate but equal, but not separate, Dr. Washington, and inferior. Separate and inferior is where we ended up. Dr. Washington, from a psychological, pathological perspective, what is it within us, a people who have been oppressed again and again by this man that looks like that man, that makes us believe that this man is going to be the one who free us?
That is a powerful question. And we will go back and we will start this with Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who said that if you control a man's thinking, you don't worry about his actions. You don't tell him to come here, to go there, for he will find his place and stay in it. In fact, if you don't tell him to go to the back door, he will go without being told. If there is no back door, he will make one. His education makes it necessary. Dr. Woodson also says that if the Negro in the ghetto look to the hand that pushes it in the ghetto to get out of the ghetto, then it'll never get out of the ghetto. Dr. Woodson was very clear about this idea of psychology and control. Though he was a historian, he understood, as Dr. Wilson says, all history is psychohistory. And so, again, thank Dr. Garvey for bringing forward the concepts and constructs out of Kemet and giving us the elements of being, understanding, thought, and wisdom. Those are very important elements. And I think then that if we talk about what makes us do what we do. It is the removal of the consciousness of who we are as a people and the replacing of such with Europeans as being predominant, as being great, as wonderful. If you can repeat something over long enough, you can begin to believe that some elements of it are true. A lie repeated long enough becomes a truism. For example, we believe that somehow that there were 13 original colonies in this country called the United States of America, and that is based on some New England construct. But if we go back and look at the narrative that Dr. Garvey told us, we know that Asar was chopped into 14 pieces, and that Asar and Aset could only find 13 of the 14 pieces. And so in reality, the idea, the foundation that is called America is predicated on the knowledge that came out of ancient Kemet and or Africa. And so the 14th piece that they were able to construct, the idea that he mentioned about the Immaculate Conception idea was the piece called the Tekon or the obelisk among the Greeks, and that this was the regenerative piece, the idea of cosmic consciousness, the idea of a seed. And so this seed looks like what's now this thing called the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. And if you look at the reality that the United States is comprised of 13 colonies, but they had a 14th piece in the center called the District of Columbia, and they tried to place in the center of it the obelisk, meaning that use African consciousness.
And it looks like a penis. And it looks like a penis,
right? A penis.
That missing penis.
It is a penis, and so it is the idea of regeneration and a new nation. And now that you said that there is no building in Washington, D.C. that's bigger than the white penis. There are no skyscrapers in D.C. because there can be no building taller than the white penis. Now let's tie this into what you said, and I'm going to close out. How do we get there? One is that the iconography and imagery that is told along with narrative. So the white phallic symbol is one of those symbols that is utilized to tell us that there's nothing greater than that which is white. We get narratives within religious practices that show us a Europeanized image of a Jesus, a Heru, or a Yeshua, right? And so we begin to identify that the highest form of religiosity and divinity is associated with Europeans. And if I cannot see physically God, but I understand that Jesus is the Son of God, and I know that I am the son of my Father, and my Father and I look alike genetically, then I begin to suggest that somehow Jesus being white has to look like his father who is white. Now, if I'm a child and I can't get that way, I understand that there is Santa Claus or Satan Claus, the idea that there's this white man that can travel around the world in an entire day. So this Santa Claus image is a white man. So Jesus is white. If Jesus is white, Santa Claus is white, and God got to be close to God, Santa Claus, because Santa Claus can travel around the world. He knows what you want, and you have to be good to him at all times. The same thing that people tell you to do in church. And the other part of this is that he knows exactly what you want. All right, they look at this. So he's all knowing.
Yeah.
He can be around the world in one night. He's omnipresent.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he has this capacity to command 8 tiny reindeer to lift up and to fly him all over the entire world. So he is omnipotent. So the same qualities that people are giving to a God construct and then tied into a Jesus reality, a child can see it physically, anatomically in a Santa Claus. Even if you dress up a brother Julius in a red suit and have him be there, the child will not want to go to him as Santa Claus because he's not the real Santa Claus. So the idea that these narratives that we're told, right, through stories, iconography, and imagery, begin to set into place a feeling, a notion of African inferiority. And so then we have to do what Dr. Garvey is saying, recover, remember, right, to join back, right, to our consciousness, who we are, our true narratives, and begin to remove those things, have an ectomy. You understand this, Dr. Garvey, right? An ectomy means a removal of something. You have to have an ectomy of something to be able to then have the real thing put into that idea of a transplant or we're a grafting into the thing so that you can have growth and development. And Garfuna, I was not going to go here, but that just came to mind. to me is that when I was in Nebraska, and I was teaching there for one summer, and I moved around with the horticulturalists, and they showed me this bush. And this bush looked like a tree that was right next to it, but the bush was shorter. And they says, do you know how we got this tree to be dwarfed like that? He said that, do you see that shrubbery over there? When this tree was a sapling, we cut the roots from the sapling, and we put the shrub roots onto this particular tree, such that it only grew as tall as the shrub would go, though it looked like the tree. And I would tell you this, is that the way that you cripple consciousness in a people is that you graft their root system from them. You take that off from them. You give them this demented, this reductionistic discourse about who they are. You put that onto them, and that they can only grow as tall as niggas, bitches, and hoes, because that's all that they've been given is a root system of niggas, bitches, and hoes, and not understand that they came from a population of divine individuals. And so this is why this is so important. That's what Dr. Wilson was talking about. Dr. Nobles and Dr. Akbar and others are saying the same thing. We have to have the ectomy, removal of this demented, diminished reality, and put onto us this original construct of, man, do you not know that you are divine, that you are God on earth? Thank you.
And you know, let's go back to Dr. Amos Wilson. Dr. Amos Wilson says the acceptance of reality means the acceptance of yourself. Right? The acceptance of reality means the acceptance of yourself. Dr. Julius, it's on the tip of your tongue. Say it, brother.
Well, basically, you define reality. Reality is what you make of it. And if you've been indoctrinated to see reality as your oppressor sees it, then you accept your oppressor's reality. So, as Kevin has been mentioning, you have to get rid of that as a mental construct, so you can get to your own native consciousness of self, your divine self, which is your true self. And then that is how you define reality. Because now when you get to yourself is consciousness as we've been describing it.
Right.
Okay. And it has no borders. It is one with universal self. So you're part of divinity. Or you can say you're part of the quantum soup, if you want to talk about it in terms of modern physics, the unified field, or you can call it God, or you can call it Allah, or whatever it is. You see, these are all takeoffs on our original story. You see, which is, the creation of Osar as an image of divinity. Ra and Ptah downloaded as Osar. Now, I just want to take off a little bit on what Kevin was talking about, the founding fathers of America and the 13 states and the obelisk in Washington. All of those guys were Masons.
Yeah.
And what does Masonry mean? Okay. They knew the Egyptian story, but they thought Egyptians were white, if you will, and they were creating a white nation. Now, the original story is really about Black civilization and a Black nation. So we have to create a Black nation. And that's what my dad was talking about. And that's what Amos Wilson is talking about. And that's why he loved Marcus Garvey. And that's why I love Amos Wilson. We are a nation. And therefore, we have to get beyond, okay, I'm Ghanaian or I'm Nigerian or I'm from Jamaica. Or what's that little island you're from again? I can't remember the name. We have to get beyond that because we're a nation of African people.
Yes.
We go back, 10,000 years or whatever. And we certainly go back 200,000 years as the first human beings. Now, I just want to touch on something before we end up, because what has happened is that other people frame our conversation. You see? So, like, for example, people talk about integration. Well, in a sense, there's nothing wrong with integration. Okay? Now, look at the fingers on your hand. Your hand is an integration of 5 fingers, but each one has a different function and can operate independently. Okay, but the problem with integration is when you confuse it with assimilation.
Yes.
And that's what some people want. They want to assimilate into the quotes dominant culture and become like those people who oppressed us. This is ridiculous. That's suicide. Okay, that's ethnocide. And it ends up as genocide. And that's black on black violence and all the other destructive things within our society. The other thing I want to talk about is that, people talk about, oh, these guys don't want to be separate. And they frame it in terms of separation. It's not separation. It's independence. I'm an independent, human being, meaning that I'm able to function as me.
Yeah.
But I'm not separate from the rest of humanity. I'm not separate from nature. I'm one with nature. Right. But I have that right to be independent, and I have that right to be part of an integrated whole. Yeah. This is what the major society does not want. They do not want you to be able to identify yourself as an independent entity that is an integral part of the body politic and can function as such. So when you get to be Afrocentric and African-centered, then you understand that, I am an African person living in the United States of America. I'm an African person that was born in Jamaica.
Yes.
I carry my Africanness with me. It's my backbone.
Right.
And it's my culture, and it's how I function. And you cannot take that away from me unless you dehumanize me. That's my humanity. It's my Africanness. Right. And it has existed for 200,000 years.
Right. And we want to remind everyone or inform everyone that as of recent, the United Nations, and this just happened, the United Nations just recognized Black people as one people. And it's based on the principles of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Again, I repeat, Dr. Julius, just because I was born in West Papua, just because I was born in Belize, just because I was born in Washington, D.C., Chocolate City, just because I was born in Atlanta, just because I was born in Houston, it does not matter. We are one people. One people. And the enemy knows this. And I repeat, Dr. Amos says that the Black man's lack of knowledge of himself was deliberately induced. As we bring our conversation to a close, the vanity of hope. We hope that a Jesus or a pie in the sky comes and frees us. We hope that the very same oppressor who has put us in this situation brings us out of it. But Marcus Garvey says that if you embrace the reality of who we are, where we're at in this physical space, hope must be abandoned, reality must be embraced. The ultimate question is African-centered consciousness, how do we use it? Brother Amos also said freedom and we're going to start with you, Dr. Kevin Washington. Freedom and independence are based on production, he says, manufacturing. We must produce or outproduce everyone else if we are to not only survive and thrive, right? This vanity of hope, the reason we are here today, President Daniel Nwambuno, live on Pan-African Leadership Center, and that we're live on Tuna Cheki TV is because we want our people to abandon this vanity of hope. What we want our people to do right now in this very moment is come to the reality of the fact that we are the original people, that masonry comes from the Moors, that science comes from us, psychology comes, everything comes from you and I. When they say nothing is new under the sun, we knew that before anybody. Now we are the consumers, Dr. Kevin Washington. We are the ones at the very bottom of the totem pole of economic opportunities. What do we do? How do we utilize this African-centered consciousness that you speak of to free ourselves? And once again, well, let's quote not Bob Marley, but let's quote the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Kevin Washington.
Have no fear for atomic energy because none of them can stop the time.
None of them. Amen.
How long will we kill our prophets? While we sit around and look? We can all we have is redemption songs. So I mean that's powerful when you begin to talk about the idea of the vanity of hope and the understanding of yourself as being divine. Dr. Fukuyama reminds us that we are a seed of a seed of a seed of a seed of the seed, which means we come from all that has ever been and all that will ever be. We have been conditioned to see ourselves as being inferior. We begin to challenge the various notions of our African inhumanity. The nomenclature that we utilize is an indicator of our belief in our own inferiority. Again, when we use dehumanizing terminology to describe a sacred and divine people, we are now blaspheming a God. And that's a powerful piece, that if I sit up and I call you a nigger, and a nigger is coming from an Africanized version of the word nigger, which comes from the word negro, which comes from the word necra, meaning black, which comes from the Portuguese word necro, meaning death. Understand, what do niggers do? Now we understand that Najir means dark substance, and so we understand that Najir was something else from nigger. That is important to be able to grasp here. So when we utilize their terminology to describe our reality, we are now bringing forward something that is about death, understanding that it is written that in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And also, if you look at ancient Kemet, they mention Medu Nefer, which was about a divine utterance, a divine speech. And so there was understanding that words then can breathe a reality into something and cause it to exist. Among the Dogon, they talk about Nomo, the power of the spoken word, that there is a word from the front, the side, the back, and there is the clear word, so dai. So they were very clear about the idea of the word, and how that ties into the narrative is that whatever you utter creates a reality. They understood that the word had hot, moist substance that was emitted into the universe that created life. And the same thing as hot, moist substance that comes from man into the acidic womb of woman to create life. So among the Dogon, they were very clear that the word has the capacity to bring forth something that is life. We have to be able to challenge the utterances that comes from our mouth, and our mouth then is predicated on what has been placed into our minds. So we have to challenge what's in our mind and then begin to overthrow a belief system of our inferiority. And so when we overthrow that, we have to again then ask the question, now, who are we? And the fundamental question is that we are sacred and divine. Things you have to do. First of all, you have to be able to ask yourself, Frantz Fanon say, who am I? Am I who I say I am? And am I all I ought to be? Right. Very powerful existential questions. Who am I? Am I who I say I really am? And am I all I ought to be? You got to be able to self-evaluate. Who am I? Explore. You have to begin to go into the idea of cultivate, to pull things out and to extract things. You got to be able to self-develop, right? The idea to put something back into the system, and then you have to act like you know. But it's not linear. That's a European construct. You go back to exploration, you go back to cultivation, you go back to the idea of knowledge acquisition and acting like you know, and you're spiraling. Either you're spiraling downward and becoming more grounded like root system, or you're spiraling upward and ascending to a high level of consciousness. But the first, what you have to do is to be able to once overthrow, is to be able to replace that content, and don't reject it, don't vomit it out, right? That's the thing too, right? When you start giving medicine to individuals that are sick, sometimes they want to spew the medicine out, but you got to figure out a way to swallow some of that medicine in order to be able to get healed. And so the medicine that came forward today, if you just slow down and unpack some of the elements of what Dr. Garvey mentioned in the idea of African cosmogony, right? And unpacking the Anubis and unpacking all of those elements of consciousness, just start to unpack those alone. that will begin to help you to understand that, wait a minute, Europeans did not give us religion and theology, that it came from African people. And how could they do that? Because they based their reality on a calendar system that was several thousands years old. A mark, the Sirius B star, that's like the Dogon people did. And so the calendar moved this way, that they transcended across 7 days, but also that the week had 36, that the year had 36 weeks, 10 days each. And so 36 times 10 is 360. So they understood that there was a circle in process, that things are moving not only in a lunar system, but also in a solar system. And so they were having those calendars to come across one another, that a lunar system would have 13 elements or 13 months. And that idea of the 13, the 12 disciples and Jesus being 13, but you see this happening over and over again in African cosmology, that there's a 12 coming across a 1 transcending into a newness. The idea of 7 also came out of African reality. Understand that there's 7 days of the week, there's 7 notes on the piano, there's 7 primary colors, that the 7th then goes into a new reality. Even when you do music, you do do, fa, la, sa, re, ray, and when you get that, you go back to do all over again. So the idea is that you transcend from the 7 into a newness. This is the thing that we have to recognize. My point is that Europeans did not give us this content. This content is within our DNA. That's why we can rap better than other people. That we engage in musicality, we science better than other people, because we are tapping into something. George Washington Carver, even the work that Dr. Garvey does, better than other people, because we are tied in something greater than ourselves. But as long as we are clouded from that, and I'll close here by saying that the sun never rises and sets. They understood this. The sun never goes anywhere. The sun is always in place. The issue is that either we are turned towards the sun or turned away from the sun, but the sun is always in place. Or the other issue is that there's a cloud that blocks us from seeing the sun, but the sun is never gone. Well, how is that important? It's important because our divinity, our power, our prowess has never gone anywhere. Either we are turned away from it, believing that somebody else has something greater than us, or we are trying to turn back towards it and begin to be blinded by it, or we are clouded because we have these funky thoughts about who we are and who we are not. But the truth is that the power of a people resides in the presence of their particular prowess. The issue is that the power of a people is how they maneuver in the world. If you want to see how divine Black people are, watch Venus and Serena play tennis. If you want to see how divine Black people are, watch how Stevie Wonder makes music. If you want to see how divine Black people are, watch how Brother Garvey goes in and performs surgery. If you want to see how divine Black people are, just begin to observe and begin to see that is a moment, a manifestation of divinity. When you begin to open up and see that, the light will begin to blind you, but more importantly, you'll begin to see yourself in the process and see that, and you'll be able to say, like the ancients said in Kemet, Anuka saw, you know what, damn, I am divine.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Right now, everyone, you are live on Pan-African Leadership Center. We have our special guest, Julius Garvey, Dr. Julius Garvey, and Dr. Kevin Washington. And right now we're at the point of closing this conversation. And right now we are informing you on what African-centered consciousness is and how you can utilize it to free yourself, right? To free yourself, that we cannot depend on anyone, including your mama. You can't depend on your mama to free you. You can't depend on your daddy to free you. It's going to be you who frees yourself. It's us who's going to do it. Dr. Julius, it's on your tip of your tongue, brother. Say it.
No, I'm just loving listening to Kevin. I mean, he's full of so much information, and it comes so easily forward.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And you were talking about the zodiac and astronomy. And they give all sorts of credit to Kepler, but Kepler himself said, I learned this all from the Egyptians. I stole it from them for the glory of the Europeans.
Yes.
And if you know the real history, we are the ones that invented everything. Why did Napoleon go to Egypt? And why did he take like 1,000 scholars with him, okay, to learn all that he could from the Egyptians?
To steal.
And we see it over and over again. Again, we talked about it in terms of the founding of the United States of America. This is all copying what we have done, what we created. And now the problem that we have is that we have been disconnected from our creative source. Our creative source is our consciousness, not the individual consciousness, but the cosmic consciousness. That's where all the wisdom is, Tehuti or Thought. That is, he brings that wisdom to us. So we have to connect to that. So we have to go inside, not outside. We have to go inside, okay, to our cosmic universal consciousness, and then bring that forward. And then we become co-creators, because then we have access to the wisdom of divinity, which is everything, as we talked about in the beginning. Everything is there. Every single thing is there. And there's no such thing as time or space. So you can take your time and investigate that whole panorama of space, if you will, the unified field. And you can go there. And then you can come back with what it is that you want to come back with to deal with the problem that you see in front of you. Otherwise, all you're doing is changing what is already out there. And if you look at a lot of these so-called inventions, all they are is
modifications.
You change a little something here.
Modifications.
Yeah. Or you look at a molecule and you change the carbon, atom here, and you move it over here, and nitrogen here, and this and that, and you come up with all these, thousands of different things, and you get a patent. And this is supposed to be an invention. You're supposed to be creative, but that is destroying the planet, because you don't know the whole integrated system.
Right.
Okay? And you've got to go to your cosmic consciousness now, okay? Because that's where, the true creation will come from. We have been disconnected. A few of us, of course, get there, and we have had our geniuses, etc. But we have to bring us all there, so to speak. And this brings us back to where we were in Kemet. It lasted 3,000 years, and it gives the world everything. All the sciences, all the arts, the basis of everything, government, agriculture, building, architecture, astronomy, everything, every medicine, everything started there. My God. I mean, if our people really knew all of this, and of course we're only touching the surface, but we've talked about some of the great people who have excavated this type of knowledge, and people need to go to that. Because it's all there. We are wonderful people with a great history, the longest history and the fullest history in the world. So there's no reason for us to think of ourselves as inferior to anybody. We are the original human beings, and everybody else, we're the prototype. Everybody else is sort of a copy. So we can feel good about that, about ourselves.
Thank you, Dr. Julius Garvey, and Dr. Kevin Washington. We want to thank you both for being a part of this very important conversation. I want to close it off with a comment by the sister Carmela Walker, MPA. Because again, we are in the process of coming out of, Dr. Julius Garvey said, we are in the process of remembering who we are. We are in the process of going towards Ma'at, M-A-A-T, which means unification with one's self, which means unification with oneself in totality. Us as one tree, one branch, one root, wherever we want to call it. Sister Carmela says that the term Black is corporate. Why are we still pushing that narrative? Because it gets us caught up in the same legal narrative that makes it corporate. And the question is, how were we able to think of ourselves as commodities under this corporate structure? Now, another thing that I want to share with you, brothers and sisters, is the term Afro. And what I'm about to share with y'all right now, I'm sharing with you by the grace of the universe, and I'm bringing it to you from direct experience. The white man introduced the term Afro at a Geneva convention in the 80s. That's when Jesse, that's when the others in my community, a brother by the name of Celio Casildo, brought the term Afro into our community. I want to let you know that in West Papua right now, we want to let you know that in Honduras right now, the government of Honduras, you see my name, Garifuna? Garifuna is a nation of people. A nation of people. The government of Honduras right now, Dr. Washington and Dr. Garvey, want to remove the word Garifuna from the history books. And they want to call us Afro. Why? You see, the Afro is not an indigenous person. The African American is not an indigenous person, which is why you should never accept the term, because anyone who owns an indigenous title also owns one other thing: land. Land. The reason the government of Honduras right now wants to change our name from Garifuna to Afro is because the minute they change our name from Garifuna to Afro, we own 72 territories in the Caribbean. They're going to take all of them. This is strategy. Why they call us Black, why they call us African American, why they call us Afro, it's all strategy. Now, there is a currency in Europe called the euro. Now, when there's a currency called the Afro, that's when I will accept that term. When there's a currency called Afro, like there's a currency called euro. So we are in the awakening process. We are in the process of making sure that our people remember. Julius, Garvey, 1 minute, your closing term. Kevin Washington, we want you to close us with something heavy, with something that is going to psychologically awaken us from this stupor. Julius Irving, your closing comment, and we want to thank you for tuning in today.
I guess it's me to go first.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's the order. Well, my only comment is to repeat what my father said. We must liberate our minds from mental slavery, because while others may help us to liberate the body, we're the only ones that can liberate your mind. And that goes back to the Kemetic saying, which is know thyself. And that's an internal process that nobody else can do for you. You can get knowledge from somebody else, you can get an example from somebody else, but you have to do it yourself. And that's our problem now. That's why the revolution hasn't really happened, because the revolution is a transformation of the individual. Because when the individual is transformed, then the nation will be transformed. It's only by transformation of the individual that we can come together as a unified people, because we have to get to that stage where we're Osar. It's the Osarian revolution that we're talking about. We have to get to Osar and become Heru. And so we become Heru, heroes to ourselves and heroes to our progeny. So that's my final word.
Hey, man, Brother Julius, we just met, but I love you, brother. Let me get this.
Likewise, Garifuna, brother.
Hey, I don't waste any time telling my brother I love him. You know, I love you, brother, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Dr. Kevin Washington, please, your closing comment.
That was powerful to talk about Asar sitting and becoming Heru. I understand that even the word Heru is the origin of the word hero, but also because he evolved his life around the divine concept is the origin of the word hour, right? And so that is just powerful just to be able to hear that. And something you said, Dr. Garvey, about we already have what we need. That just reminded me of the storyline that it's a European story about politics in its nascent in its beginning, but the Wiz, Black people took it and modified it slightly differently, the idea of the Wizard of Oz. But I think that the overarching construct in this speaks to us, Brother Garifuna, and that is that this person was on this pathway to find something, and this person left with a dog in hand named Toto. And so she comes to the scarecrow, and the scarecrow is saying that he wants to go with her because he wants to find a brain. And he thinks of how to navigate the system to go all the way through to get to Oz. And on the way, they come across a character who says, I want to go with you. I want to have a heart. And so the Tin Man symbolizes the idea of coldness and void of emotion, affect. He says he is passionate about everything along the way. And this passion helps them to know how to fight and to move forward. But then he wanted to go find a heart. And then the lion, they came across the lion, and the lion wanted to go get courage. And as they ran into danger, the courage of the lion defended their safety, but he still wanted to go to Oz to get to go get some courage. And so the storyline is very heavy, and we could talk about the narrative about how they looked at the "you can't win" the scarecrows. So telling the scarecrow on top of the crows to tell them that giving them some knowledge about who he was not. But I want to show you this part of the story. That is that when they got to a certain part of the narrative, the dog jumps out of the young lady's hand, Dorothy's hand, and goes and pulls back the curtain and shows everybody that there is no particular person behind. There is no big thing. It's a man pulling the strings and making the smoke pop out all the time. And so they said, the dog was saying, listen, the thing that you were coming here to look for, you already got, and let me show it to you, because even in the name of the dog in Latin, the name Toto means everything. So in reality, Dorothy always had everything. And so when we look at this story, we always are trying to go and find something
that's already there,
already within.
Yeah.
And so I would suggest that we already have Toto. We already have everything, but we just don't believe in it. I just came back from the Gambia. We do homecoming Gambia. And when I tell you that people there are asking for certain things, or please help me, and I'm looking at all the mangoes that you have. I'm looking at all the eggplant that you have. How can somebody be hungry and you got eggplant, you got cabbages, you have bell peppers, you got hot peppers, you got onions growing in one field? Ain't no way you're supposed to be hungry. That if the community just took a eggplant and took exactly right and took the onions and started boiling it down, you would have something. But because we're so reductionist in thinking that we think that we got to get it from somebody else, that we cannot see the power within. And so it is not simply just us here in the U.S. It is a global African phenomena that we have begun to be duped, as the doctor, as brother Malcolm X says, hoodwinked, bamboozled, run amok. We begin to believe that somehow the power is without, but the real power is within. And so you brought this very well home. We talk about it, whether it's Black, African, however we begin to ground the conversation. When we see ourselves as one people, as one nation, right? The idea of one nation, one God. When we see ourselves as that, it transforms everything. You mentioned how the United Nations talked about one people. The challenge that we have is that if
I just interrupt for 1 second. One God, one aim, one
destiny.
There it is. One God, one aim, one destiny. Thank you very much. I could see it. It wasn't downloading fast enough. Thank you. And so when we begin to look at the debt that they suggest that Africa has for the entire world, if we saw ourselves as one people, we recognize that all of the free labor that they were able to garner from Africans throughout the diaspora, actually Europe owes Africa tremendously. If we are seen, we're seen as one people. If you understand that the gold on the crown of the queen's head came from the gold out of Africa, then there is no particular crown, the jewels that are there. If we recognize that the tea that the queen drinks today came from Africa, then even not only the crown on her head, but also the tea that she drinks is African. When we begin to understand that there is no thing called Swedish chocolate. There is no chocolate out of that, because they don't grow the plants. The plants come from Africa. When you begin to recognize that there is no cell phone technology without the Congo and coltan and tantalite,
and cobalt,
that there is no particular technology called the internet without Mawali, African man created. There is no cell phone itself without Smiley and Miles inventing it. That Africans have done all of this stuff, and we keep giving over our genius to somebody else to be validated. The reality is that the precious jewels are within. And I'll close by saying this, is that coltan or tantalite is deemed to be the most highly conducted metal on the face of the planet. But do you understand that what is above the ground is in the ground at the same time? So the idea is that as the body that we have here decomposes back into the earth, the dirt, then it becomes a part of what is known as tantalite or coltan, which means in reality, the most highly conducted metal or the most intellectual aspect of being an element that walks on the planet is right here. So we are the tantalite moving on the earth, but we don't recognize that. And we let other people tell us that we're nothing but some dirty coal. But in reality, we are the most highly conducted metal known to man. And when we recognize that, Man, can't nobody stop us. That's it. We done. We out.
Oh man. You know, let me quote Malcolm X as well. The chicken has come home to roost. Do you hear me? I said the chicken has come home to roost.
Cock-a-doodle-doo.
Cock-a-doodle-doo. You know? So look, thank you again for tuning in to the Pan-African Leadership Center, where the conversation is African-centered consciousness. We're here to liberate you. Well, again, we repeat, we're here to inform you so you can liberate yourself, because none but yourself can free your mind. And again, we close by quoting Dr. Amos Wilson. Knowledge of the self is the essence of wisdom. Knowledge of the self is the essence of wisdom. And President Daniel Mwambuno, the United States of Africa, Tuna Cheki TV, we're here to simply open your eyes, remove the veils so that you can see for yourself, just like Dr. Kevin Washington says, you the baddest thing out here. Peace and love.
Peace and blessings.